Hello, hello, hello. I see somebody out there.
Hi.
Hi, Jessica. How
Good. How are you?
are you? Good to have you today.
Thanks. Thank you.
Tacola? Is that you?
No, I'm Alicia.
Oh, you're Alicia. Well, we have a Tacola McCree. And I thought you, so how about that? Do you know Tacola?
I don't.
You don't? Well, you'll get to know her.
Okay.
Well, I tell you what, we have so many new agents, which is so fun to get to, especially when I get to meet you on Zoom. At least I can see your face and know your name. And so I have been working on some things with Dakota this last week, and that's what I thought. Oh, she must have been able to log in, and so pardon me, Alicia.
Oh, it's okay.
Now I know there's two McCrees, new ones. And I found out this morning that we have two Cindy's, and they spell it CYND, and one says DY and one says DI, and they're on the same team. So I thought,
Wow.
well, you all sure know how to confuse me. You know, so I guess we just think names are unique these days, don't we? So are both of you brand new in real estate?
Yes.
Yes.
Brand new. All right. All right. And you've been with KWO just a little while, right?
Yes. So I actually just completed my onboarding on Tuesday.
Did
So
you?
I'm like real brand new. And so I went to actually try to get the forms and I wasn't able to. They said I guess it will take a few days before I'm actually able to get the password ID. So yeah, I'm like really new.
Oh yeah, you really are. Bless your heart. Well,
Yeah.
now, let's see. You probably don't have your NARDS number available yet.
No.
NARDS is NRDS. That's a number that you get when you are registered with the National Association of Realtors.
Okay.
Okay. So if you just finished your onboarding paperwork, your
Yes.
paperwork now will go down to Canopy. Canopy, of course, is your, that's the Realtor Association. Hey, Lorenza. When you join the firm, then you join Canopy, and that's going to be your MLS and your Realtor Association. And
Got
when
it.
you join the Realtor Association, you actually join 3 associations. One is Canopy, the local, then
Okay.
the North Carolina State, which is the state association, and the
Okay.
national. So you
Okay.
actually are joining all 3. You pay realtor dues once a year,
Okay.
and that keeps your membership up. Well, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, is the one that assigns that NARDS number. So
Got
that's
it.
why you're not able to get to the forms yet, because you
Okay.
have to have that NARDS number. So
Got
make
it.
sure if Canopy doesn't call you in a day or so, I'd be giving them a call. If you want
Okay.
the number, I'd give it to you. What the number?
Yes.
It's 704
Mm-hmm.
940
Okay.
3110.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
That's the membership department down there. But you probably just give them a day or so, because they're processing pretty quickly right now, but just so
Okay.
you can follow up with them to make sure where you are. Now, Alicia and Lorenza, are you both already through all that process, right?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you get did you get all those classes, online classes taken?
No.
What
I
Oh, you
haven't.
got to
specifically are
get
you
those done. Along with everything else, you got to get those done.
Yeah, I just got my login information yesterday.
Did you? Oh, well,
Yes.
you're right, ready. So for some reason, some of our agents are missing the orientation class to the association. And that's the class where you get the Code of Ethics course. The Code of Ethics is required every 3 years. So when you take it now, you're done for that. At least you don't have to do that again. So when you start seeing my reminders come out to take your code of ethics, you say, whoo, I've done mine, you know, so at least you've got that one done. And of course, the next thing you got to keep on your calendar is you've got 18 months to do your post-licensing. So don't wait till the 16th month. It'll kill you to try to get 90 hours done. So you might want to get that on your calendar and kind of space it out. So
Okay.
those are the primary ones right now. And of course, you'll begin, I don't know, have any of you started Ignite yet?
July.
Yeah, July. Yes, I'm gonna start in July as well.
Good. Yeah. Well, that's your basic course from Keller Williams International. And it's a really, really good course. It kind of gets you in the groove, you know, gets you into some of the patterns and some of the processes of the way we do things. And now the forms, you will use North Carolina forms once you have that access to the NARDS number. You'll be able to sign up you'll get an email from Scott Leroy, and you'll have some passwords that I think you all chose some an option of passwords, and he'll give you the assignment of passwords, and then you can go in and assign that to DocuSign and be able to get your forms. But in the meantime, if you need any forms, you just contact me and I'll send you one over. You just have to handwrite it, but at least we'll get it. Now, what I want to do, I'm going to send you 2 or 3 packets of forms that we're going to go through as much as we can today. So let me get your email addresses and I'll try to.
Do you want to send it
Oh.
to the chat, or are you just gonna write it down?
I'm just going to write it down.
Oh, okay.
Is it your full name? Jessica, what's yours?
JJ, like Jessica Hillard, HILLARD @hotmail.com, and that will come to me like right now from my desktop.
Okay, that's J Hilliard.
JJ, 2 J's.
2J, JJ. Okay,
Yes.
at Hotmail. Okay.
Yes, thanks.
.com. Okay, and I'll send that right now. Okay, and
Okay.
Alicia, what's yours, honey?
It's my first and last name at iCloud.com.
Did you say Outlook?
iCloud.
iCloud. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm still getting used to the iCloud. It didn't compute in my brain. Sorry. Okay, Lorenzo, what's yours, dear?
Mine is Lorenzo Finds Homes, all plural, at Keller Williams.
Finds Homes at Keller Williams. Okay. All right. And I'm going, okay, now y'all hang in there. I'll try not to lose you, okay?
Okay.
If I lose you, I'll be back.
Okay.
Okay, let's see if they come through.
Did you put mine under at Keller Williams or just at KW?
At KW.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Lorenzo finds homes at kw.com.
Perfect. Thank you.
So let me know if you see it. There's several forms, so it may take a moment.
Okay.
I have had a remarkably quiet morning, and I just found out my phone's not working. I said, no wonder it's been so quiet. I keep getting emails. Where are you? So I guess I go to the phone store after this is over and find out why my phone's not working. Did y'all get them yet?
No, I still haven't got mine. I'm refreshing, so let's see.
Okay.
Yes, nothing yet.
No, I don't have it yet either.
Okay. It's JJ Hilliard at hotmail.com.
Mhm.
Alicia McCree at iCloud.com.
Right.
Let's see. Still nothing, Lorenzo?
Nothing yet.
Wonder if I ought to send them individually. Doesn't generally take that long.
Yeah, nothing yet. Maybe by the end of the class.
Well, surely not that long. Gosh. No. Still nothing, huh?
No.
I wonder if something's wrong with my internet. Maybe that's why my phone's not working.
Yeah, it could be.
But I'm on Zoom. Isn't that weird?
Hmm.
That is really weird.
Did you give us your first and last name? I didn't write it down.
My name is SABRAROMEO. There's no period, just one big long name at kw.com is my email.
Okay, what's after SABRA?
ROMEO.
Okay. And you said at KW?
And that's my one email. I've tried several different ones, and it's hard to manage all of them with as many of y'all as there are. So if you can always get me at that one. Okay.
Okay.
Do you want us to send a test email really fast, or to see if you get ours, or?
Why don't you do that?
Okay. Okay.
Is it kw.com?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's amazing that Zoom's working if my internet's not. Aha, I see it, Lorenza. Okay, well, it came in, so let me just reply to it and see if it goes through. Anything, Lorenza? Anybody got anything?
No.
No, no.
Isn't that weird?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we're probably just gonna have to look at the forms. I don't know why it's not going through. Okay, I see your Alicia's. Let me try that.
I've received it.
Did you?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I just,
Was it to your replied email or?
Yeah.
and the group?
yeah, to the reply email.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
So I
so it
sent
is.
you a test one as well too.
Okay, Alicia, let's see if yours comes through.
Okay. Yes, I have it now.
Who was that, Alicia?
Yes, ma'am, I have it.
Okay. Let's see, Jessica, see if yours came through.
Okay.
Mercy, thank you for your patience. I'm so sorry. I don't know what, it's got to be user error. I have to confess. Thanks for sending me your email. That might be a good way for me to do it in the future. Aha, there you are. I didn't lose you. That's pretty good. Now I'm gonna see if we can share while we're at it. Jessica, did yours come through yet?
Not yet.
Ah, fiddle. You know, sometimes I get an issue that the file is too large. I wonder if that might be one of the things.
Yeah, that does happen.
Uh-huh. So I wonder if that might be one of them. Well, keep watching that, Miss Jessica, and
Okay.
let's kind of start looking at some of these forms, and and we'll keep trying to get them to you if they don't eventually come through.
Okay, I
Um,
just received it.
Yay!
Okay.
Now let's see if you all got the same ones. Oh, well, I tell you what, forms are not the most interesting subject matter, but at the same time, they're the most necessary things that you all do. You've got to learn how to lead generate, and you got to learn how to get business, and all that is vastly important. But if you get business and don't have the tools or don't know how to use your tools, that's like going out to cut out a tree down with a screwdriver. You know, you kind of have to know your tools. So we'll try to make it. Hopefully it won't be quite as boring, and I think it's good for you all as you're just getting started, because obviously you have an interest in knowing what the tools are.
Yes.
There's a couple of forms I want to go over with you at first. These are not ones you're going to see a lot, but you will see a form called disclosure of compensation. And let me show you right down here on the bottom right-hand side. You see this number down here, that's 770, and you'll see a copyright date of 7/2021. That is the most current version right now of all of our North Carolina forms. But come July 1, we're going to be seeing our forms change to a copyright date of 7/2022. North
Okay.
Carolina forms change, at least the copyright date changes in July 1 every year. So, but they do give us 60-day grace period. So when you start your files, make sure to look for the date on there. And once you get into DocuSign, Jessica, when you're in your DocuSign or your Dotloop or Zip Forms, whichever program you use, you should, after about 2 or 3 days into July, you're going to see that the copyright date of 7/2022. And from, like I said, we still accept the 2021 until August the 30th. But just go ahead and start getting in habit. We are not having any major changes to our forms this year. So we probably won't even have a new forms class, which is the first time in 20 years, I can tell you. But just so you know that they're coming out. Now, this form 770 versus the form 20 or 220. There's your other form number. These two forms are about you getting paid. Now, there's confusion on these two forms, which is one reason I wanted to bring them to your attention in the first place. Every now and then, when you are doing a transaction, let's say you are doing a transaction with Coldwell Banker, another firm, or it could be another Keller Williams, because you know Keller Williams, the offices are independently owned. So dual agency doesn't work with another Keller Williams office because they're independently owned. So you could be doing a transaction with, let's say, KW Connected, or you could do with Coldwell Banker. And for whatever reason, the commission is going to be cut. All right. Let's say you agreed or they agreed to change the commission. Then you want to use form 220, and you would note that right here under number A. If there's going to be a change in the commission that's offered in MLS, I'm sure you've already looked at the MLS sheet down on the bottom of what you see what an SA is. That's the selling agent. That's your buyer's agent. So that's going to be your that's going to be the amount of money that's going to be paid to the buyer, to you as a buyer's agent. But if you need a change, use form 220.
Okay.
The confusion comes in the title of the form. The title of the form, this one is confirmation of compensation, agency and appointment. And let me show you the name of 770. This is where the confusion comes in. 770 says disclosure of compensation. So can you see why it appears that you might want to use disclosure of compensation? Because that seems to imply that you're going to disclose a change or whatever the compensation is going to be. This form, this 770, is only used with your client. This is not used with Coldwell Banker or another KW office. This is only with your client. If you're representing the buyer and for whatever reason you get an additional, let's say you go to a new construction and get a bonus. Yeah, I'd like to be able to say that these days. You don't get them right now, but there are times that the market's not quite as hot, and buyers agents do get an extra commission called a bonus. In that case, you have to disclose to the buyer that you are getting that additional compensation. And when I say additional, we're going to go over it in a minute. The buyer's agency agreement, in your buyer's agency agreement, you already have an agreement as to what the buyer anticipates you getting paid. So additional would be in addition to what's in that buyer's agency agreement, okay? So just keep in mind that 770 is between you and your client, nobody else. 220 would be between you and another firm, or you and Keller Williams and another firm if there's a change in compensation. Right now we're seeing more reductions. The buyer's agent's commission is not being shared equally, and you may have become accustomed, as a lot of agents have been accustomed, to sharing equally from the listing side and the buyer side. We're not seeing that as the norm these days. So just be aware that if you have a buyer's agency commission that's offered in MLS that's significantly lower, let's say you're anticipating 2.5 or 3%, and it's offered 2%, then you might want to go back to that agent, that buyer's agent, and request an additional 0.5% or an additional whole percent. That doesn't mean they're going to give it to you, but you have a right to ask for it. So you would use form 220, right? Because you're going to ask for an additional amount of compensation over and above what you're being offered in MLS. You would not need form 770 because your buyer has already agreed to pay you up to, or pay you 3%. And that might be a little confusing to you, but if you get in that situation, this is just an orientation to class today. But if you have any questions, you can always email me or call me.
I
Except
do
when
have
my
a
phone's not working.
question.
Uh-huh.
What's the name of that form 220 again?
Confirmation of compensation.
Okay.
Confirmation of compensation, agency, and appointment. The primary thing you would use it for would be the compensation piece. Also, if you, let's say you have somebody, you're going to show your parents a vacation home outside of the MLS area. Maybe you're going up to Boone, or maybe you're going to Wilmington, who knows? Let's say you want to help them buy a house. You can, with your license, you can go to another area as long as the listing agent will work with you to do the transaction. You can do the paperwork and all. I don't highly recommend you doing too much business outside of your own MLS, but at the same token, your license allows you to. The problem is you don't have access to the properties unless the listing agent will cooperate. In that scenario, you would need to use form 220. 220 again, so you don't have a guarantee with the MLS in Boone or the MLS in Wilmington. So you're going to have to get agreement with the listing firm that they will pay you whatever they're going to pay you. And most of the time it's what they offer other agents, but just know that would be the form you would use in that scenario too. And again, these are not things you're going to use every day, but you need to kind of know about them. Okay, let's scoot on down here and get into the forms that you'll use every day. the working with real estate agents disclosure. I'm in the 1221 additional buyers forms, if you're trying to figure out which one I'm in. The working with real estate agents disclosure changed last year. We have had a brochure for 20 years or longer. As long as I can remember, it's been the working with real estate agents brochure. So it took me a little while to get used to saying disclosure. This is a working with real estate agents disclosure. One side of the form is for buyers, and the other side of the form, if you're printing it out, is for sellers. All right. It is a one-page document. It has been simplified. I really like it because the brochure was overwhelming to people when you were just beginning to talk to them about how real estate agents work. And so, and again, this is real estate agents in North Carolina. We all have our own little rules and our idiosyncrasies that we do. And even when you get your South Carolina license, you're going to find out how different the states can be. But working with real estate agents in North Carolina, if you're working with a buyer, these are the options. And again, this is your disclosure to the client. This doesn't have to do with the client, except that you're going to tell them how you as an agent will work with them as a buyer. Okay. Now, if you want to look right down here, one of the first things you want to point out is this right here. In fact, if you have a highlighter, make sure you highlight that when you're talking to them if you're in person. This form is not a contract. It's daunting when someone maybe just meets you and you start talking to them, because remember in pre-licensing when they said you've got to present this disclosure at first substantial contact. So that means when you just first start talking to them, most likely they'll start disclosing to you what their motivation is, like why they're moving, what price home they're looking at. And if they start talking that conversation, you put your little hand up and you be like what is the cross guard at the school? Put your hand up and say, I got to tell you something. Before we get too much further, the North Carolina Real Estate Commission requires us to explain to you how real estate agents in North Carolina works. And so you take about 2 or 3 minutes and you've got 3 options here. And I expect that you, as agent disclosing, you're going to check all 3 of these options, because we offer all 3 of these types of agency in our firm. Obviously, we work with buyers, just working with them individually, and with other firms, which is called single agency or buyer agency. Then we have a way of working with the buyers in a term called dual agency. Dual agency is when we represent the buyer and we also represent the seller. And when I say we, it's the firm that's in the agency agreement. So the firm is the one who represents both parties. Now there's another option. If for whatever reason your buyer would not want you to represent individually the seller and the buyer, then we have something called designated agency, whereas the firm, the broker, the charge of the firm, being me, would designate someone else to represent the seller. With as many agents and as many listings as we have, most of the time that designated agency is going to come into place because you've shown a listing that might be listed by an agent with Keller Williams Valentine. So both of you then would be designated agents. Okay. So just don't go into too much more detail. They're not going to totally understand what you're saying, but you're exposing them to the concept that there is a single agency and there is a dual agency within the firm. And within the dual agency, we can designate 1 or 2 agents to handle the business representing sellers and buyers. Now, this little comment down here, about unrepresented buyer. Every now and then, a buyer will choose not to have representation. Yes, we can work with them, but you would have to explain that in a scenario such as that, then you would be responsible only to the seller. You would not be responsible for representation, and you would not he would not be responsible to quote unquote take care of that buyer. There is no loyalty or confidentiality, so they don't need to be talking to you about their motivation because you're not representing them. Okay, now that is your disclosure form, and on the disclosure form, again, you're going to check, you just check, this is not initials by the prospect. This is you checking that you disclose to them these 4 options, and come down here, get their signature, you sign it, you put your license number, and you put your firm name, Keller Williams Ballantyne area. Now, that is the buyer's disclosure. And again, the seller's is similar, but we'll talk about that next month when we talk about our seller forms. Let's talk now about the exclusive agency agreement. Before I go any further, can I ask if you have any questions?
Yes,
Okay with-
when, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So
Yes,
when,
Go ahead. You're on
you
mute.
can go ahead.
You're on mute. This is the form that you go over, even if you don't go into the buyer agency. When you first start talking to someone, let's say you're at an open house and they come in to see the house, and you start talking to them about what their motivation is. You don't necessarily even use that word, but you said, why are you interested in this house? Or are you moving from out of town? You start that dialogue. That's when they start answering, is when you need to show the disclosure. All you need to do is explain it, get their signature, and upload it into Command, and you're going to go ahead and start you an opportunity with your work with real estate agents. Now, hopefully you'll be able to go into the buyer agency agreement. You often do not do it on that first time you're talking to them unless you have set up a buyer's consultation. I highly recommend, if you can program your own self to make sure that you have a step in your process called a buyer consultation. If you can get that buyer to come into the office, that's best. But if you can't, meet them at Starbucks, meet them at McAllister's, a place where you can talk about buyer agency and talk about what they want. You want this consultation because it sets the tone of how you're going to work together. It sets the tone that you're a professional. You're not just going to be an ambulance chaser. They call you and they want to see a house, so you go rushing out and show the house. You really don't want that tone set with your clients. Again, you want them to know that you're going to explain, you're going to set expectations to help them to understand what's going to come next. You are there as their guide. You are there as their counselor, sometimes more than just in real estate. I was telling one of the girls last week, I said, realtors are bridges. The realtors are the bridge between somebody wanting a house and somebody getting in that house. And the sad thing is sometimes that bridge gets walked on. Sometimes you feel like those high heels are digging in you because it's a hard time. It's a happy time. It's a scary time. It's all the emotions that you have to manage. You've got to manage your own emotions, and you've got to manage your client's emotions. And I say manage, I mean guide to the best way you can. Set those expectations, help them to learn to trust you. If you don't know that answer, you're going to assure them you're going to find the answer, and then you're going to get back to them. You don't have to know it all. None of us do. I got to tell you, I've learned something new today. After 30-something years, I'm still learning something new every day, believe you me. But at the same token, I keep learning and you're going to keep learning. Now, let's talk about the buyer's agency agreement. Until you get this buyer's agency agreement signed by the buyer and agreed to, you don't have any employment. This is your employment agreement, all right? So when you get your buyer's agency agreement signed, then you know that you owe fiduciary duties to that buyer. And you remember, did you all learn the acronym OLD CAR, or did you learn another acronym? You learned OLD CAR, yeah.
Old car.
The OLD CAR, yep, that really helps to help you remember what your fiduciary duties are to that buyer or the seller, obviously. And that kind of guides the way you work with that person. And you'll probably talk to them somewhere along the way about OLD CAR. The buyer agency agreement it's desired that you get it right up front. There are some people who say, well, I don't even put anybody in my car until I get a buyer's agency agreement. That's one way of doing it. If that's the way you want to do it, that's fine. There are other people who would say, well, I'll give them 3 houses. I'll show them 2 or 3 houses. But when we start to get serious, then we need to have a serious discussion. I'm not going to run them all over 2 states. And if they're not serious about buying. So you want to sit down and do some paperwork. And when you sit down and do the paperwork, this is by and large what we're talking about, getting that employment agreement in place, all right? You'll notice it says at the very top line there, or second line, the buyer's agency agreement is between the buyer. If I were you, I might make it a habit to ask them to show their driver's license just so you can get the correct spelling of a name. So help me, I can tell you 2 different instances through the years that people have either misspelled their own name or misspelled the name of their spouse. So I just generally ask to see the driver's license. But let me tell you, if you ask to see one person's driver's license, you need to make that a habit. And you know, there are a lot of different nationalities now, and the names, you know, might be difficult. I have 2 Lorenzos and I have 1 Lorenza, you know, so I sometimes have to look at the A or the A. No, the A is the A, isn't it? The A or the O. So you want to get the spelling of the buyer's name to the best of your ability. And looky there, the next line says firm, doesn't it? That's going to be Keller Williams again. And I would use the Keller Williams Ballantyne area. You can use Keller Williams Realty because that is one of our DBAs, but we like Keller Williams Ballantyne because it differentiates us from other Keller Williams Realties. Now, right here, you see this blue box? That blue box, anytime you see something in blue, it's take note of this, you know, just take notice. Don't go past this box. If it's in red, it's actually a warning and you better stop and look at that one, okay? And someone says, well, what if I send this out and it's not in color? It doesn't have to be in color. It's just primarily for you all to understand which ones are notes and which ones are warnings, all right? This is talking about finding out the actual name that needs to go up here. Who actually has ownership rights or the authority to represent ownership rights. Where it says here, if the buyer is a corporation, an LLC, a trust, or other legal entity, the entity should be named as the buyer. Let's say you see a lot right now, we're seeing a lot of entities that are LLCs because we have a lot of investors working in this market. So you might have a buyer that is an LLC, and you need to know that in an LLC, a manager is the one who has the right to sign on behalf of that LLC. Now, they should have some paperwork that would verify that. And if you have a buyer who gives you the name of a corporation or the name of an LLC or trust, you want to see, and you don't have to see all the documents, but there should be at least one page in their documents that would designate them as the person who can sign on behalf of that entity. On LLCs and corporations, you can go to the North Carolina Secretary of State website. I think it's NCSOS. If you go to that site, you can look up look it up by name, the name of the LLC or the corporation, and you can find out who the manager is. If I were you, I would probably verify and confirm it, but I would still like to have a copy of that one page from the buyer that would indicate they have the right to sell, sign for it. And when you're signing these documents, on these last pages, you'll see a place for the buyer and the seller to sign, and you'll also see a place for entity. And the entity, when it's signed, the entity is the name of the LLC, and then there's a word by, BY, and that would be by that person. Okay, and I'll show you that as we get through it. A trust is different. A trust is rarely ever even recorded. Hopefully the attorney has recorded them at the Register of Deeds in Mecklenburg County or whatever county it was written in, but you will not find it on the state website like you would the LLC. But often the trustee their name is going to be in the name of the trust. If you have an issue with that, or question, just give me a buzz. Now look here, you see in bold print here, it says, it reminds you that if you haven't done the working with real estate agents, you need to do it right here. Because the buyer is going to be reminded that you have given them that. And I tell you what, every now and then I get paranoid about that working with real estate agents. And I sometimes, when I'm doing it by hand and I'm sitting with the client, I put me a little line right here and I put initials there. Because you'd be surprised how many people forget that they've signed a buyer's agency agreement, and they go off to an open house next week and they decide to work with that agent because they like that house. They forget that I've signed a paper with them over here this week. So it's really, I just really kind of like to have initials right here, but that's not what the form was designed for, but that's kind of what I like to do. When you come down here, the type of property, most of the time, and I would say hopefully 99.9%, you're going to check this little box right here that says residential, okay? As a PB, you are not going to be commercial, and hopefully probably even as a full broker, you're not going to be doing commercials. You all are residential agents. We have people who specialize in commercial, and that's not going to be one of my PBs, I tell you that. I have never figured out what other is. I'm really not sure what that is. One of these days I'm gonna have to ask one of the form writers, what kind of other is there really? But anyway, general location. Let me give you a little hint on this. If you will make this general location, let's say you want, the people say, well, they want to see properties in South Charlotte, Valentine, Pineville, maybe they might even want to go over to Matthews. If I were you, I would write Mecklenburg County and surrounding counties. I would not put South Charlotte, Pineville, Matthews. And I'll tell you why. We've had two different scenarios where someone was very specific of the towns that they wanted to show in, and that buyer has gone to another area of Charlotte, like Statesville or Gastonia, and bought a house with another realtor, and you don't have any claim because you said you were only going to show them houses in those areas. Aha! So be general. It says general location. Now, when you get your South Carolina license, you could also say Mecklenburg County and surrounding counties, including York and Lancaster counties, South Carolina. That means you can go into South Carolina with that buyer, but once you get in South Carolina, you're going to have to start using South Carolina forms, okay? You might show them one or two houses, but then you'll use South Carolina forms. So general location, Mecklenburg County and surrounding counties. Again, other, you may want to put some specific like waterfront or resorts or 55 plus community. You don't need to, but you could. Like here, the term of the agreement here, a contract's not a contract if it doesn't have a term. It has to have a beginning and it has to have an end. The beginning of this most likely is going to be today because this is the day we're doing it. All right. The day it's going to be signed. Let's say June 9th. Okay. That's this is going to be our beginning day. Now we have two options here. We have a buyer that's going to buy a single property. And once we close on that single property, our agency agreement has come to an end. It's terminated. Or we have occasionally some investors who want to buy more than one home. And you can check this option and use the buyer's agency agreement in the next opportunity, the next file you can set up, because you now have the option of check here, giving you the right to show multiples. The term up here is probably going to be a shorter term. Let's say it might be 4 months or it might be 6 months. This down here, this date is going to be, let's say, a year. I don't know that I would go too much longer. I might get bored with them after that time, but it's up to you, whatever they want to agree to you. But if you're going to invest time with multiple sides, you might want to ask for a year. Okay, that's your beginning term. Now, the next section is about the compensation. Compensation, under 4A, you can see there's a term called non-refundable retainer fee. We don't do retainer fees. It's really not commonplace. It's in our area. It'd be very, very unusual that you would see a refundable or non-refundable retainer fee. The only time you might consider a retainer fee would be if someone wants to see some rentals, because you don't get paid very much for rentals. And a lot of times you might put, a couple of 100 miles on your car and it's $4.51 or $4.59, whatever it is now a gallon. Lord have mercy. So you might want to start the conversation. Say, I want to help you find this place, but I'll show you 3 or 4, whichever you decide, houses. But after that, I'm going to have to ask for a retainer fee because I got to have some gas money, and make light of it. But at the same token, I've had a couple of agents who've done it, and literally only a couple. But that's something to be aware of if you are doing rentals, because of the low income that you get from rentals. This is what we're most concerned with. The buyer agrees that the firm's fee for services hereunder shall be in the amount of, and for eons of years, we've most often written 3% there. And I wouldn't hesitate even now to put 3%. The firm expects 3%. The firm is very aware that sometimes you're not going to get that. When you have an MLS listing that they're only offering 2.5%, the firm doesn't go after the buyer for that 0.5%. The firm accepts what's in MLS. If it's 2%, the firm understands that that's what's offered. But remember that Form 220 I mentioned to you earlier? That 220 is when you might want to go back to that agent and say, hey, man, I'm trying to work for a living too. Can you increase that up to some amount, over the 3% or 2.5%? And that's where you have that conversation. And then if there is agreement, then you use the 220. Every now and then you do have to take a lesser amount. There's a lot of different scenarios, and we can talk about that on another day when we're not just going on the form line by line. Okay. One of the things to point out here is this is where it says that we will seek our commission from the listing service, but through the MLS or whatever the MLS is offering is what we basically are going to accept, or we will negotiate it. All right. Please don't ever, ever, ever say my services are free. This is one of the big topics this year from NAR because of some lawsuits. Agents can no longer say your services are free. That has been kind of a buzz phrase for years in helping buyers to see the value of using a buyer agent. You're going to have to find a way to show your value other than it's free, because it's really not free, obviously, to them. But again, don't use those words because your services aren't free. This is where it says if the buyer purchases property where the compensation offered by the listing firm is less than the fee, or where no compensation is offered. Sometimes for sale by owners don't offer any compensation, but you can still work with them. Then the buyer and the firm agree that the buyer will pay the difference between the fee and the compensation offered unless prohibited by law. And there is no law that says the buyer can't make up the difference. That's probably the stickiest provision in all of this agreement. Because again, sometimes, more times than not, buyers don't think they are going to pay anything for a buyer agent services. And the form is written so that it's neutral. It's neutral from, you're going to get paid that 3% from somebody, either the MLS and the seller, or you're going to have to get paid by the buyer. You're going to learn some scripts in Ignite and through your coach, but by and large, it's the firm would expect a certain income, not only from the firm, but for you as an agent. As I mentioned a moment ago, you're in this business to earn a living, right? You're not just in it, it's not a hobby for you. You're making a living. And therefore, to make a living, you're going to have certain income on transactions. So that's what it boils down to. So just make sure that you have a good script and you feel comfortable in helping them to understand that your services are not free. Okay. Now, the next item down here, this is the paragraph about that form that I started off with is today, the 770. If for a chance you get anything extra, which would be wonderful if you do. If you get anything extra, you use that form 770. So if I were you on my notes, I might write 220 here and 770 here, just to remind you of the paragraphs that go with those different forms. Now going on down here, page 2, the compensation is not paid until closing. It is earned when you go under contract. It is earned when you go under contract. It is not earned at the time of closing, although I got to tell you, you will have earned it by the time you get to closing. It may not be written here that you earned it, but by the time you get through the contract and negotiate, you think you've done it. You have just begun, darlings. But when you get to closing, you just cannot believe how many things can happen that can slip out of place even the day of closing. So know that you don't get paid until closing, although it's earned early on. Now look right here. The buyer understands, acknowledges that there's a potential of a conflict of interest generated by a percentage of price-based fee for representing the buyer. The amount, format, or rate of the real estate commission is not fixed by law. We can't fix it, but it is set by each broker individually. That's why I said our firm would expect 3% and may be negotiable between the buyer and the firm, and we will negotiate. Okay, that's just making a note of it. Let's scoot on down here. I'm not going to go over every line in here because I expect you to kind of read through this. If you could read through a lot of these forms once a month, whether you're working with a client or not, you'll keep current with your tools. The firm's duties are outlined in here. One of the things you might want to, again, that's setting the expectations of how you're going to work with them. This this is right here is an interesting little addition to our buyer agency agreement. Fair housing has been uppermost in our minds and our training this year, so that we don't forget some of the aspects of the fair housing regulations and laws. And so the form writers have included it actually in the agency agreements. And one of these things that has caused some problems is something called love letters. NAR calls them liability letters. Do you know what a love letter is? You know what I'm saying when I say a love letter? That's the letter that a buyer gives to a seller to relate to them, to make them like them. You know, so they're going to tell them that they go to the same synagogue, or their kids go to Providence Day, or there's different personal little connections. The buyer is trying to connect with the seller so that the seller likes the buyer. And we've grown to call those love letters. And NAR tells us not to use love letters because of too many potential violations of fair housing. The word children, oh my gosh, just forget you even knew that word. You cannot use the word children anywhere, you know, and that is often one of the things that's in those letters. Another reason you don't want to, you as an agent need to know about the letters. You need this set the expectation of the buyers that you can't be party to giving such a letter to a seller. Now, if they want to mail it, whatever they want to do, it's up to them. But you cannot, that's not part of your representation. You can't be party to it. You can't be the person who's responsible to determine if there's fair housing laws in it or violations, first of all. And so NAR has recommended that you just kind of back away and don't be party to conveying or submitting a love letter. A love letter is not part of your offer. Okay, it is not required to be delivered like your offer is required to be delivered. So just kind of get a grasp of that. If you're interested, I've got a really good article from NAR that I can send out to you if you want to know a little bit more about that. Now, here it outlines the duties that you're expecting. And one of the primary things you're expecting is that they work exclusively with the firm and with you. I mean, really, that's what all this is about. How you're going to work together and you're going to go steady. There's not going to be any dating around. We're going to go steady. I'm going to be available to you to show you houses. I'm going to be available to you to help you find out information about houses. Watch the expectation of a buyer who thinks you have to find their house. Every now and then I get a buyer, they'll call me and complain and say, well, I found my own house. And I said, well, that's good. You and about a million others could get on Zillow, and you can get on realtor.com. It's not real hard to find a house these days. We don't gatekeep any of the houses that are on the market anymore as an MLS, but we do gatekeep some of the information that's available to go with those houses. Okay. So because they find a house, that doesn't mean that they can get out of paying you a buyer's agency commission. So just kind of keep that in mind, how sometimes buyers do things. If you want to outline some of these others as you're talking to them, you might want to highlight those. Now, these are 3 forms right here. These 3 forms are recommended by the North Carolina Realtor Association. We give those 3 forms as samples to anyone, whether they're going to be a buyer or a seller. You want to have those available in that buyer consultation or when you have your listing consultation. Those are sample forms, and they have the word sample written on them because we can't give out forms to the general public, but we can give one that has a watermark sample on it, because the buyer, if they will take the time to read through a offer to purchase that has the word sample on it, it would help them to understand what they're going to be signing when they do make an offer on a house. So you have the sample of the offer to purchase. You have a sample of the professional services disclosure that tells them the different inspections and services that they're going to be purchasing in their due diligence period. And then you have a brochure on the home inspections, or this one is in the, a regular page format, so you can email it or send it out in your forms program. But they also have a nice brochure that you can get from the real estate commission, or you can get from the realtor store uptown. So you always want to be able to check all three of these, that you have given these to the buyer one way or the other. Sometimes when you're in person talking to the prospective buyer, you might want to say, well, I'll go back to the office and I'll want to put together this paperwork, and I'm going to send it to you through our e-signature program, because it'll be easier for you to sign there. And so if you don't have the forms in front of you, then you can send it to them, or you can use just your forms and tell them you'll send it to them some signature, or just have them sign manually, because you can scan and upload those as well into your program. Home warranty. We're not seeing too much on the home warranty right now, because the people are just trying to get a house. They're not worried about all the extras that they can get. But what this is to make you aware and the buyer aware that we do not take a fee for setting up a home warranty. You see, it says here, the buyer, if we help the buyer in obtaining a home warranty, a fee of, there are some home warranty companies that offer a fee, but there's been too many lawsuits through RESPA. And so our firm made a decision many years ago that we wouldn't accept a fee. Now let's scoot on down here. The most important thing that I want to point out to you is this dual agency. This is where you go into a little bit more detail or get questions on what dual agency is, and you can see it's outlined quite nicely here, very much in detail, so that you can talk with something with black and white in front of you, to talk to them about dual agency a little bit more in detail. And what you want to do right after you have that discussion with them is come down here, this pattern. You're going to see this pattern in the listing agreement as well as the buyer's agency agreement, where it says authorization. Buyer authorizes the firm to act as a dual agent, representing both the buyer and the seller, subject to terms and conditions set forth in paragraph 14. This right here is what you want your buyers to initial, because that is allowing the firm to be the dual agent. Whether you are an individual dual agent or not, it allows the firm to be a dual agent, which allows you then to show all the listings of our 500 agents. So if the firm cannot be a dual agent, then there's no sense in you showing some of these properties that are listed by Keller Williams Valentine. It causes some extra work on your part to have to call that agent and say, go back to your seller and see if your seller would allow dual agency. And then you have to go back to the buyer and say, well, the seller's allowing it. If you still want to see this house, I'll need you to change the agency agreement. See, that's a lot of it's cumbersome. You don't want to have to do that. And you don't want to eliminate all these houses out there. So you want to help the buyer to see it's to their advantage. And it truly is that the firm could be a dual agent. Now, there is a confusion right here, because it says the buyer deserves exclusive representation. It's like, oh, duh, haven't we not been talking about this whole agency agreement about exclusive representation? I guess they couldn't think of other words, but whatever. We're right back to exclusive representation. And of course, the buyer's going to say, well, I thought you said you were going to represent me exclusively. You want me to work exclusive with you? I thought that's what you were doing with me. So it's really confusing when they see those words. So you have to go back to the benefit to them of the dual agency. And if they say no to dual agency, they would say yes to exclusive representation, which means they cannot see or write an offer on a Valentine listing. And that would include any listing that you have, obviously. So you've got your hands full here, keeping the difference the distinction between the exclusive agency relationship that comes because of a dual agency versus an exclusive representation that does not allow dual agency. And again, this section on the designated, if you want to have them, if they agree to firm, this is where you say, if you want me to always be designated just to represent you and nobody else, then I need you to initial this right here. So obviously the goal, if any are signed, you would rather them sign this. And the second option would be this and the top. You can't have this without this. And this would be your very last option. I don't see that very often. Every now and then you will. The main thing is they just want to make sure that you're going to take care of them. And if you can help them to understand you take care of them by them initially here, then they're generally okay with it. Now down here, I'm not going to go through all these. There's a lot of different paragraphs for you to be aware of. But the thing I want most to bring to your attention is this section right here on wire fraud warning. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. You can't imagine the billions. I didn't say millions. I said billions of dollars that have been confiscated from our country through hacks and through it's like a crime ring, probably rings. FBI has warned us repeatedly through this past few years, and this wire fraud warning, you got to stress even at the beginning at this agency level to help them to understand they should never do anything in writing and on email about their bank accounts for wiring. They really do have to do it verbally, and they need to be verbally communicating with somebody they know who that is. You know, don't just call anybody at the bank, and don't just call anybody at the attorney's office or a number that comes through on somebody else's email. It's too easy to hack those. So make sure that you warn them on the wire fraud. Now, when you get past that, don't forget that. When you get past that, this is where you're going to have them sign. Again, I told you you've got your buyer's information, the buyer's information. Here's that entity buyer. This is where you're going to put the name of the LLC or the trust. And here's the name of the person. I mean, excuse me, this is the signature of the person. And here's the name of the person and their title. If it's the LLC, this is going to be the manager. If it's a trust, it's going to be a trustee. If it's a corporation, it's probably going to be the president or maybe a treasurer. Okay. And then you're going to put your information down here. Not on that line. So this line here, we put the real estate firm, the firm's license number. If you want to jot it down, it's capital C 13291. That's the firm's real estate license number. And then here's where you put your individual license number and your signature. And there's your buyer's agency agreement. Now let me show you. Let's talk about the offer to purchase. We've got a buyer's agency agreement in place now. Now we can write an offer to purchase. Don't you start writing an offer to purchase if you don't have a buyer's agency agreement. You hear me? No pen to paper until you get your employment agreement. You got to know who you represent. All right. Now let's see. There was something I was going to show you. Oh, I know. Let's see if it's in this one. Let me show you something. These are some additional addendums that I was looking at. No, it's not in that one. It's in your email. It's one of the emails. There's some graphics that can talk to you about due diligence and the overview of the contract. Don't look for it now. We're going to go through the wording, but make sure you want to look in that the other file. It's called So You Have a Buyer. It's in that file. And I don't know how I've lost it in mine, but for some reason I did. So in all my trying to email it out, you might want to take a look at those graphics hopefully I'm one of these people that I kind of have to diagram things out, and I like to see the overview of things and see how it fits. And so that really helps me, and I think it helps some buyers too. But hopefully it will help you as an agent to understand these contracts. But we're going to go through the wording right now on the offer to purchase. The offer to purchase right now, let's look at the date and let's look at the form number. It's Form 2-T, copyright 7/2021, changing in July, right? All right, this is the standard contract for a residential home. It would be used for single family, condo, townhome, up to 4 dwellings of a multifamily. You would use this contract. The only other contract that you might use would be the offer to purchase. That's for vacant land, and that's going to be 12T. If you're selling just land with no dwelling on it, then you would use 12T. We also have an offer to purchase for new construction. You rarely, if ever, will use that form. Most new construction builders have their own form. And if they don't have their own form, their agents probably will say to use this form because they're more used to using the 2T. But there, just so you know, there is that other form for new construction. But by and large, you're going to be using this one. All right, let's see. Scooch this down a little ways.
Ms. Saber,
Uh-huh.
I have to leave at 2:30. I have a call time and so is on vacation this week.
Oh, well, you're excused, but we will miss you. You want me to send
Yeah,
you the
sorry about
recording?
that.
You want me to send you the
Yes,
recording?
please. Yes,
Okay.
please.
That'll help you get to the end of it. Well, we're going to do our best to try to get through it. But thanks for letting me know why you left. I didn't want you to leave mad.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't want to just leave.
Okay, thank you for doing that. Make sure that, again, you want to get the correct names, the legal names. The attorneys say, please get the legal names. There's not anything that says legally that you can't make it with Bubba Smith, but the attorney doesn't know which Bubba Smith to use. So they want to know Bubba Smith's legal name, all right? So you want to get the legal names to the best of your ability. Now you're gonna say, well, how am I gonna know the seller's name? I'm working with the buyer. How you reckon you're gonna find the seller's name? There's 2 places you can find the seller's name. You can go to the tax records of that address, or you can look at the residential property disclosure, and it's supposed to have the seller's names on it. So when you are looking at the MLS sheet, that data sheet, up in the right-hand corner, you're going to see a hyperlink. I don't know if you've seen that yet. It's called Parcel ID, and there's generally 8 or 9 numbers, and there'll be that blue line under it. If you click on that blue line, it'll take you directly to that particular record of that property. And you can find lots of information about the property, but you can find the seller's name. And that's where you probably are going to find the seller's name. The other place, and hopefully that listing agent has done one of my very favorite things of all time, is when they attach the residential property disclosure and the MOG to the listing. Oh my gosh, you can't how many years I've spent having to call the listing agent trying to track down the residential property disclosure when you're writing an offer. Now it's attached to the MLS in a lot of the listings. So look for it there. So that's where you would find the seller's name. You got the buyer's name. Remember when you had them show you the driver's license? You got the buyer's name, and you're going to fill it out in here. The property also is you're going to have the street address, the city, the county here. Now, and you might have an address that isn't consistent in the MLS and the tax records. You go to that tax records and say, well, this must be a different property. So you go back to the MLS and you look and make sure you got the right property ID. Every now and then they'll have a different street address, and it's generally, see this right here, governmental authority over taxes, zoning, school districts, utilities, and mail delivery may differ from the address shown. So it's most often the mail delivery that's going to cause it to be different. If there is a difference, you want to verify with the listing agent why there is a difference, and you'll use the street address that's in MLS most of the time, because that's the most known of it. So you want to clarify or verify with the listing agent. Now, when you do the listing, right, when you're going to put here under the legal description, we in our area, in this general area, Mecklenburg County and surrounding counties, we do not use plat references. We use deed book and page. We do not have a plat book or page. All right. So when you say plat reference, you don't put anything here and you don't put anything here. So help me if I didn't have a first last week. A lender had one of our agents take a lot number off. She had thought she was being helpful and put, I think it was lot 14. She'd put 14 in here. The lender made her change the contract and amended to take that 14 off there. This is where you need to put the full legal description. If it's an L14, put L14 here. Don't put it up here, because we do not use plat references. All right. The full legal description is going to go here. Usually it's an L something, M something, B something, with some numbers. So, but you'll see that also in your MLS sheet. It should be listed on your MLS sheet as legal description. You verify with the tax records. So when you're writing your offer, have that tax records available, either in another window open, or you'll have it printed out. Subdivision and condominium. This will also be in your MLS sheet, and it will be in the tax sheet. Now, the condominium, let me tell you how you know if a property is a condominium. In the legal description, there will be a word, and that word is unit, U-N-I-T. Unit means this is a condominium. It may look like a townhome. It may be 2-story. It may look just like a townhome. But if there's no land with it, it's a condominium. And it will have the word unit in the description. If it is a townhome, it's going to have a tiny little bit of land that'll go with it. It may be 0.75 or whatever, 0.075, but it'll have just a little land with it, and then it's going to be a townhome. So you're going to look for the subdivision or the condominium name. Should be in both sources, the MLS and tax. The property ID, remember those, I told you there was a bunch of numbers with a hyperlink blue line under it. That's what you put here. And other description, that's that legal description we just talked about that starts with an L. Now in pre-licensing, you'll remember that they had something called meets and bounds. Do you remember that? There's that term, meets and bounds. You're not going to have it often, but every now and then you might have a meets and bounds description. If so, you write the word meets and bounds, see attached, and you will have to print out from whatever source you get the meets and bounds description and attach that with the offer. Okay. And this deed booking page, again, you'll find that in your MLS and also in your tax records. And you might want to make sure that they are the same. All right. Now let's scoot on down here to this section. This section is where we're gonna put about the money. This is your purchase price. Let's say you're gonna offer $300,000 arbitrarily. Out of that $300,000, you're going to have a due diligence fee and an initial earnest money deposit that will be subtracted from that $300,000. And this is simple arithmetic going down through here. It's gonna be 300,000 minus the due diligence, minus the initial earnest money. And just as arithmetic, this is going to be your balance right here. This has nothing to do with the loan. Absolutely nothing to do with down payment. It has to do only with deducting these two amounts from the total. That's what that balance is down here. You rarely are going to see these, anything other than 0, 0, 0, 0. Now, but this right here, this is the biggie. Those of you who have been listening to other agents, and you might have, maybe you've already written off, or I don't know, but you've been hearing some of the agents talk about the high due diligence fees. Oh my gosh. Nobody in the real estate world would have ever believed that you would have a due diligence fee that would be the price of a car, you know, or more. I have seen more than a half a dozen $100,000 due diligence fee. Yeah, that causes you to drop your jaw.
Mhm.
Not unbelievable. And
Yeah.
not only on $1 million properties. One was on a $680-something thousand property, and I'm thinking, what? How do you have that much discretionary funds that you can gamble $100,000? But you're seeing that. A common due diligence fee is $20,000. Whereas, you know, a year or two ago, you rarely saw a $20,000 due diligence fee, because that $20,000 fee, when that check is written, that money is transferred to that seller. What you want to tell that buyer? It's gone, darling. It's gone. The only time you're going to see that is at the closing table when you get credit for it. But if you're not to the closing table and it's not on that closing CD, it's gone. So you prepare them so that they don't think, well, if I find something I don't like, then I'm going to get my due diligence fee back, right? Wrong. Rarely. And if they get the due diligence fee, it would be through a court case. So you make sure that they understand what the due diligence fee is. The due diligence fee is just for that. It's really, you're paying for the right to have the availability of the house for inspections, and primarily for the right to walk away, terminate the contract for any and no reason. That's what that due diligence fee is for the right to terminate for any or no reason. These people who get buyer's remorse, and that happens, if they have paid their due diligence fee, they can terminate without risk of being sued for specific performance. They can terminate without any consequences from the seller if they have paid their due diligence fee. Every now and then a buyer gets buyer's remorse and decides that they'll just terminate before they pay that. They cannot terminate until they have paid the due diligence fee and have the right to terminate. And that's a real sticky situation. They think they're outsmarting somebody. You know what? Not every seller will put up with that. The seller would then have a right to hold them to the contract, and they might lose the earnest money in addition if they haven't paid the earnest money. So they could lose the due diligence fee and the earnest money. So you want to help them to understand the benefit that they have when they pay that due diligence. If they are in a due diligence period and they find something that they are just sure the seller knew about, the seller didn't disclose it, So they start yelling misrepresentation, misrepresentation. The seller knew, the seller didn't tell me, so I want my due diligence fee back. You can't tell them they're going to get their due diligence fee back. Don't even breathe that you're trying to get it back from them. The bottom line is, if you hear the word misrepresentation, that is a legal term. That is not something you can determine, and that will have to be settled either in small claims and or civil court. All right. You can't determine that. So you can go by the terms that are in this contract, because there's black and white. There's nothing in this contract that discerns misrepresentation. So help your buyer to understand that as well. The initial earnest money, we're not seeing the initial earnest money quite as high. For years, it was a low due diligence fee and a high earnest money. Now we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing a higher due diligence fee and a lesser earnest money. The higher due diligence fee is being accepted in a lot of the multiple offers because the seller says, aha, that's my money. I got to have my name on it. It's not going to be in a trust account. It's going to have my name on it. I'm going to have it in my account. So the thing that appears to be the deal breaker right now in a lot of these multiple offers is the amount of due diligence. And lousy mercy, I hate to see buyers have to fork over that much money. I really do. But that seems to be what the pattern is that breaks some of the multiple offers. Now let's look at these little things right here. The due diligence fee can be paid in cash. I do not recommend it. You can't make copies of cash. Remember, that's against the law. So you suggest that the buyer go across the street to 7-Eleven or go to the bank and get a money order or a certified check, anything that's a paper trail. All right. Looky here, wire transfer or electronic transfer. I don't know why a seller would give their routing number and their checking account number to someone who just put in a paper offer to buy their house. Yes, there's some people who are doing it. And I guess when you're thinking they're going to get $40,000, they're thinking, well, you can have my account number. I'll change my account if it doesn't work. There are some sellers that have been willing to give that information out. Again, it scares me. It should not be done electronically. It should not be done over email. It's going to have to be done verbally in order to have that accuracy to be and not risk wire fraud. Just be real cautious on that. The other type is electronic transfer. The electronic transfer works real good on a normal due diligence fee, like $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000. The electronic transfer, like Zelle or Venmo or PayPal, whatever electronic means, but it's not working on these high amounts of due diligence. So about the only thing you can do other than certified check overnight to the seller would be the wire transfer. I would highly discourage the wire transfer and more likely go with a certified check, but make sure it comes overnight with a tracking number. Do not accept the fact that they mailed it. That's not acceptable, because you see right here, it says the due diligence fee is made payable and delivered to the seller by the effective date. What's the effective date? The effective date of the contract is the date everybody has signed. Like on page 2, you've got some definitions on page 2. The effective date, right here it is. If they want it in black and white, the date that the last one of the buyer and seller has signed it or initialed this offer, or the final counter offer, if there is one. This is the effective date. It is rare that you would ever be able to have that due diligence fee in your hand to be able to give to the seller. All right. We're doing so much business online. We're doing the e-signature programs. We're doing the electronic transfers. So that causes some consternation, obviously, of being able to honor that effective date. But within the day, you want to make sure you get that. Now, let's go back up here and again, stress that. And as it's just not acceptable to mail. underline that. It is not acceptable. All right. Let's see. Now the initial earnest money goes to the attorney. The due diligence fee goes to the seller. The initial earnest money goes to an attorney. Our firm does not hold trust account any longer. So the attorney that you want to start again early on talking to them about which attorney they would like to use. They're probably going to ask for a referral from you. And you will find some other agents who will give you some referrals. I would obviously start with McNaught and Clements because they're so convenient. And you can go right down there and talk to them eyeball to eyeball. Don't even have to go off of the second floor of 34th, 3rd Torrington. So, but make sure that you give them 2 or 3 names, not just 1, 2 or 3 names, and so that they know, because you've got to get them to get that earnest money to that attorney. Now you could take a check and deliver it to the attorney, but make sure that if you do, that you have receipts for it. Now, right here, it says you're going to deliver by cash, personal check, official bank check, wire transfer, electronic transfer, same options as over here. But look at this section, either by the effective date or within 5 days of the effective date. Obviously, that's what most people check. All right, because you're going to try to get the due diligence fee immediately. They give them 5 days to get the earnest money. And no, it doesn't count if they don't pay it within those 5 days. Okay, it's still the term of the contract. Now let me show you something right down here. This little paragraph right here, it starts on this page. If for whatever reason the seller does not get the due diligence fee, or if the earnest money is not deposited with the attorney, the listing agent is to send a form, it's form 355, and that form is to demand cash from the buyer. And if the buyer doesn't respond within the 1 business day, the seller has a right to terminate the contract. This is the only time that the seller has a right to terminate the contract and put the house back on the market. So help you be aware and help your client to be aware that for them to mail a check that doesn't get there timely could put you in that scenario that the seller could say that they're going to terminate the contract. They cannot terminate it without giving that 1 business day notice, however, to the buyer. Okay, and that's what this paragraph is about here. The next paragraph is about the earnest money. Most of the time it's about the initial earnest money. You rarely ever have additional earnest money. If you were to have additional earnest money, you would have to deliver that in certified funds or readily available funds. Now, right here is where it says escrow agent. This is where you're going to put the name of the attorney who's going to be holding the earnest money. That's why I say you want to start early on talking about which attorney they might want to use. And if they have a personal friends attorney, make sure that attorney is a real estate attorney, not a divorce attorney or whatever. Make sure it's a real estate attorney. Okay. This little note right here kind of talks about how if there's a dispute over the earnest money, how it's resolved. Most of the time it's resolved through negotiation. And if not, it can be sent to special proceedings in the court in the county where the property is located, and the buyer and the seller then can present their side of the story, and the judge will determine who gets the earnest money. The attorney nor the firm has any say-so as to who gets the money. That would have to be by agreement by the parties, or to go to that court. The attorney would send it to the court, and the court would set up a special hearing. The effective date, that's the description. Here's your definition of due diligence, your definition of the due diligence fee. Again, A negotiated amount, if any, paid by the buyer to seller with this contract for buyer's right to terminate the contract for any reason or no reason during the due diligence period. That's where the explanation I've already gone through with you. You've become real familiar with this paragraph right here. The due diligence period. The due diligence period traditionally has been somewhere around 21 days. Now you might see 1 day if they're waiving their right for inspections. You might see 5 days if that would be a term that the seller would be more amenable to accept that contract, because they couldn't have very long to have inspections. We're not seeing that many offers come in with a long period of due diligence right now. But I think there's a little bit of shift happening, just a little. So we might start seeing longer periods. And this term, time being of the essence, that means that's a drop dead date. At 5:01, it's no longer accepted, all right? That due diligence fee is at risk at 5 p.m. At 5:01, that earnest money is at risk. The earnest money then would belong to the seller at 5:01 if the contract has not been terminated, or if there's not an agreement in place signed by the buyers and the sellers that they're going to proceed forward based upon that agreement. So this is probably the most important time in the contract, and this being time being the essence. There's only 2 places in this contract that you have a time being the essence, and this is the primary one. The other one is that additional earnest money. If for chance you were to have additional earnest money, and often that will be the scenario if you get to close to 5 p.m. on that end of the due diligence period and you need some extra time, therein sometimes the seller will say, I will grant you extra time, but it's going to cost you an additional earnest money. That's where you might have additional earnest money that would come in. And again, that's a time of the essence as to the date that it's going to be given, and it has to be given in certified funds, no personal checks on additional. Now, this date right here, this blank here, that's your projected settlement date. You're anticipating closing the loan and being able to close this thing and hopefully in 30 days. If so, put the date that your lender or the lender says that you can close. All right. So you're going to put the date. The lenders prefer a date here rather than 30 days from effective dates. We used to write all that in. Lenders have asked us to please be specific about the date here. Sometimes they ignore you anyway, but at least you have that date. Now, an interesting thing in our North Carolina contract, which I think is really helpful, is something called a delay in settlement. We have built into this contract a 7-day delay. Up until last July, it was 14 days. Now it's 7 days. And the delay in contract is allowable for the scenario when it's not possible to close it. And when you say not possible to close it, that generally refers to a title situation, a title that they don't have a clear title, or maybe there was something with a register of deeds of something else, or the loan is not ready, something happened, they didn't get the loan on time. It's often a third party that's causing the delay in settlement. It is not acceptable because the seller decided to have a vacation that lasted longer than that week. I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. That is not possible. When they take the contract, they know if they've got a pre-planned vacation that date. So make the arrangement at that time. Don't wait until the day of closing and say, oh, I can't close, I'm still on vacation. Not gonna work. All right. So you have the 7 days, you don't have to do any more paperwork. You don't but you do have to communicate. don't let the listing agent be sitting there expecting to go to closing and you don't close. We had that happen to 2 sets of people Friday, on 2 contracts that didn't close Friday for various reasons that was beyond their control. Both buyers and the sellers show up to closing, two different ones, and didn't get it closed. One did close on Monday, and I think one closed Tuesday. So, but the good thing was they did close. But right here, you want to make sure that they understand what that delay of settlement is about. Closing in North Carolina. Closing in North Carolina constitutes 4 separate steps. The contract, you go to the closing, go to the attorney or do a mail away, whatever, you sign the papers. Okay, you have that. Then there is one final title review. The attorney goes through one more time and looks at the title to make sure that some lien hasn't been filed from the time he did the title work. Then from that point, then the lender does one final walkthrough, or one final process where they release their monies, and then they release the money to fund it. And then there is a recording at the Register of Deeds. Until the deed is recorded, that transaction is not considered closed. Once that deed is recorded, it is considered closed. Up until the time it's recorded, the seller still owns the property. And because the seller still owns the property, sometimes the seller is not going to be willing to give over keys. And that often is the recommendation of the listing agent, not to give the keys until the deed is recorded. Of course, there are lots of things that can happen between the time the buyer gives over the money until the time it's recorded. So you want to have that discussion early on with the buyers. Tell the buyers to do themselves a favor and plan to stay in the hotel that first night after they've done their paperwork. I know that's an added expense, but let me tell you, that is so nice to be able to sleep on clean sheets and get up and get a shower before you meet the moving van and start unpacking and doing all that moving. So you, again, set expectations. They are most likely not going to get the key. Now, you are going to confirm with the listing agent whether or not the seller is going to give the key and how they're going to give the keys. There's not a set way. But you as a buyer's agent, in order to take care of your buyer, you're going to want to determine in time to help your buyer not feel so totally lost out there and not being able to get into the house. In a lot of states, and years ago here, when you went to the closing table and you turned over that big old check, then you had keys that the seller pushed across the table to you in the garage door, and you went back to the U-Haul it and took the pets and the kids and you went to the new house. That's not the way it happens today, because back in the late 90s, and I was in real estate at that time, we had something called the Good Funds Act that was passed. And that means attorneys have to record the deed timely, and that's when they enacted really having a closing that would include the recording of the deed. Let's see, let's look right here. Special assessments. Another thing you want to watch out for are special assessments. Special assessments are those amounts of money that a buyer would have to be paying over and above their mortgage payments. Special assessments are settled at closing. Special assessments are those things that the seller has to pay before they can close it. Special assessments have been assessed and levied against the property, like a lien, and the seller at the time has to settle that lien to close it. Now, up until this past year, we had something called proposed special assessment. That means there are things that the HOA or the county, most of the time HOA, is considering as a special assessment to be voted on. it was so confusing that they took the word out. They took that provision out. We now no longer look for proposed. We're looking for the word special assessments, and the seller has to pay it. Now, we have another issue that has arisen out of that. We have to find out what material facts are about the condition of the properties from the HOA. So material fact has become a real big issue that since they've taken away proposed special assessments. If the HOA anticipates they're going to put new roofs on several of the buildings, that could be to the tune of, $100,000. Well, the HOA is not going to pay it. Well, they do pay it, but they pay it out of the dues. So what they do is a special assessment to increase the dues by X number of dollars. Let's say $65. Well, that $65 could make a difference in some people's mortgage payment of whether or not they qualify. Hopefully not 65, but I heard one yesterday that was a $200 assessment on it's only for a year, but it's $200 a month. So I mean, got to tell you, that is very difficult for some people, for any of us to start plunking out, excuse me. Excuse me. But anyway, so if they are anticipating a $200 assessment or whatever amount, your buyer has a right to know that. And your buyer has to know if the financials of the condominium or the HOA association, if there's reserves or not reserves. So you might want to be in communication with the HOA people to find out about assessments. And it is now listed as one of the duties of the buyer in their due diligence period. It is a duty of the buyer, but how many buyers know how to do that? So you are going, as a buyer's agent, need to guide them and be the one who basically does it, find out the information for them, okay? You see this little note right here? Buyer and seller's respective responsibility for the payment are addressed in paragraph 6A and 8K. So you're gonna need to take some time and go back and look, because I don't think we're gonna get that far today. Fixtures, oh my goodness gracious, fixtures. Look at here. Look at that list of fixtures. Is that not incredible? What's there, 20 fixtures there? It's amazing how many times people, sellers particularly, think, well, those things belong to me. I'm going to take them. And so we encourage listing agents to just go with this same list and make sure of what things the seller's going to keep or what things the sellers are not going to keep. And if they're not going to keep it, they need to have it listed in MLS that they're not going to keep it. Like if there's a chandelier, or if there's some speakers, or what about the Ring doorbell or something that is attached, they need to list it in the listing agreement and in MLS that that's an exception that's not going to convey with the house. Otherwise, the buyer has a right to all of these things to be left with the house. One of the things that's caused a lot of a lot of confusion is this thing right here: storage shed utility building. And he said, well, that's not attached to the house, but it's attached to the land that the house is on. So instead of for years we were told to look for a permanent foundation. If the storage shed was on a permanent foundation, concrete or whatever, then it stayed. They took that qualifier out, and now if there is a storage shed or utility building in that yard, it's anticipated that it stays. But if I was you, I would be clarifying that, because you'd be surprised how many sellers don't think it's supposed to stay. Another thing that this thing right here, alarm and security systems. Oh my gracious. security systems are built in most houses these days. So it's not the system, it's the service that you have to watch out for. The service that's on that system and the accessories. You know, the accessories can be removed. They're not considered fixtures. So the accessories can be moved. You need to know which ones are being removed, and you want to get that buyer in touch with the security service company to verify that. We have a little in-house form on security systems just to kind of remind you to take care of it. It's a little worksheet. The alarms, the contract that the seller has with that third-party company for service for their security system, that is a contract between the seller and that company. Typically, the company will allow a transfer, but they charge a fee. There's a transfer fee. You need to know what that is if your buyer wants that service. If the buyer does not want the service, the seller's going to have to pay the penalty fee to pay out of it, or the seller will have to transfer it to his new house. So there can be several $100s involved there. So don't get to the day of closing and try to figure out the security system. Do it early on. And speaking of not waiting to go to the day of closing, your insurance, the homeowner's insurance, 2 weeks before closing, you've got to have that buyer know that they better be talking to their insurance agent, because you can't get insurance in a 24 or 48 hour period of time nowadays. Some insurance company actually do an inspection. So make sure you get that started early on.
I have a question. So a lot of the stuff that you say, I've been writing it down. When we go to Ignite class, are we going to get like a checklist so that we remember, like, make sure they know to get the insurance before, and, are we going to, or? No?
I think they do, but I'll send you one. I have one. Want me to
Okay.
send you all out that one too?
Yes,
Okay.
thanks.
Make sure. All right, I'll do that. I think they do, but again, the Ignite, remember, Ignite is a national program. And unless the instructor is going to give you some local information, that often they do, you might not get it. And a national checklist would be more general than some of the specifics that we might have put together in our checklist. Okay. Thanks for asking about that though. Fuel tanks. Fuel tanks is another issue. Fuel tanks might have fuel in it. If it has fuel in it, you got to know who that fuel belongs to. That fuel belongs to the seller till the day of closing. So the seller can sell that fuel. And most of the time it's propane gas for gas logs. It might be propane gas for the house, which some houses have it, but you don't see much oil anymore. More likely it's the propane. So you want to make sure that you check who the service provider is, the fuel provider is, because those tanks are probably leased. And if they're leased, then that you're going to have, if your buyer has the use of those gas logs when they get in their house, they will need to have arranged for service with that same provider probably. So you just be aware of that. Let's scroll down here a little ways. Items that are leased or not owned. That's one of those things, a propane tank, any type of oil tank, antennas, satellite dishes, receivers, appliances, alarm and security system. These are things that are generally leased or could be leased. And so make sure that you clarify that so that your buyer knows. The things that don't convey, we've talked about that. Those are things that should be listed as an exception in your MLS data sheet. It should have that listing. If it doesn't, then and there's something specific you might want to ask the listing agent. Look here, this little sentence gets lost, but it's an important little sentence. Seller shall repair any damage caused by removal of any items excluded here. Let's say they decide to there's a TV mount, and the TV is personal property and the mount is a fixture. So if they take the mount to go with their TV and they've told you they're going to, it says this doesn't convey, the mount for the TV and the great room doesn't convey, then they've got to fix the wall in substantially the same condition as it was in when they attached the mount. So you should not be seeing that there was a mount here, okay? So you know that this is a real important little system. It also tells you that if it's a fixture, it's going to cause damage when it's removed in most cases of all that list of things up here. Blinds, door blinds, shades, most of those stay with the property because they're attached in some manner. Cloth curtains or draperies do not stay with the property because they are not attached. They may be on a rod, rod stays unless it's removed. Pottery Barn has some really nice rods, and I've seen a lot of people want to take their Pottery Barn rods. If they don't convey, they've got to, the sellers have got to have it patched, okay? So this is something to be real careful about. Again, that's expectations. Now, look at this right here, this little section, personal property. Did you know that a refrigerator is a personal property? It is. It's not a fixture. A built-in dishwasher, a built-in stove, microwave if it's built in, those are fixtures. A refrigerator is rarely ever, although my daughter has one of those rare built-in refrigerators, but most of the time you're not going to have a built-in refrigerator. So keep in mind that if the seller offers a refrigerator in MLS, that is no guarantee that that refrigerator will be there when your buyer goes for the walkthrough, unless you put it in this offer to purchase. If there's a refrigerator, when your buyer goes to that house, the buyer wants a refrigerator, you write it here. Do not rely on the fact that the seller said, well, I will let you have the refrigerator. It's personal property. So it has to be named in the contract. If it's not named in the contract, it doesn't exist. Okay, so that's a little clarification that we get caught up on sometimes. In fact, here's a little note. Any person property that will be a part of the sale should be identified in this paragraph. And a refrigerator is one of the biggest things that you're going to find out. Oh my gosh, I have talked past 3 o'clock. I'm so sorry we didn't get any further, but I will send you out. I will send, if you want me to send the recording, those of you who want it, put your name and their email in chat and I'll send it to you. I might have another recording that goes further into the offer to purchase if that will help you. And those of you who didn't get the handouts, again, put your name and email in the chat for me and I'll send them to you. I have enjoyed seeing your faces and getting to know you a little bit today. And hope you've gotten some good information and I just wish we had longer. I tell you what, you can't cover all this material in a 2 hour period of time, but I do the North Carolina listings the first Thursday of the month and the North Carolina buyers the second Thursday of the month. And then we switch to South Carolina listings and buyers the third and fourth weeks. So anytime you got that the Thursday afternoon from 1 to 3, check in with me and we'll try to give you a little bit more education on those forms. And I gave you my email. It's my full name, SABRAROMEO@kw.com. So let's stay in touch and y'all have a great week. Bye now.
Thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Michaela. Hi, Daisy.
Hi. Hi, thank you.
You're welcome.